stormy winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, and I say, it's alright. Little darling, the smile's returning to the faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, and I say, it's alright. Sun, 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 here it comes. Sun, 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 here it comes. Sun, 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 here it comes. Little darling, it seems like ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, and I say, it's alright. It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. Oh, oh, oh. It's alright.
Pleasantville is a super swell satire from the late 90s that seems to be your standard wacky coming-of-age teen comedy. But it is so much more than that. And those who have a nostalgic love for this wonderful but often forgotten film will tell you not only is it gosh darn hilarious, but more than just that, it should be ranked among the most culturally and socially relevant films to ever come out of Hollywood. As the film begins, we are introduced to David, your typical socially awkward teenage boy of the late 90s. He's too scared to talk to girls and too lazy to get out into the world to experience all it has to offer. The only real talent David has is his encyclopedic knowledge of his favorite 50s-era sitcom, Pleasantville. Next, we are introduced to Jennifer, David's sister. Jennifer is your typical Valley girl teenager of the late 90s. Like, she's a total housebag, and her only real ambitions are those ever-important Friday night plans. Also, she's totally a few dildos short of a sex shop, if you know what I mean. One fateful Friday evening, both siblings are gearing up for their big night. David is preparing to watch the big Pleasantville marathon he'd been waiting all year for. Meanwhile, Jennifer is like totally getting ready to not watch the big concert on MTV with a major hottie from school. This, of course, leads to a battle as old as time itself. The battle for the living room remote, which ends the same way they usually do, with a broken remote. Luckily for David and Jennifer, a kind old TV repairman shows up about a minute later. Jeez! Can you imagine if Comcast showed up on time, let alone that fast? No, of course you can't, because you started waiting for the Comcast guy as a young boy. And now you're a grown-ass man, and he still isn't here yet. And again, the arrival window was between 1998 and 2028, so he still might show up someday. As the repairman surveys the damaged remote, he begins to bond with David over Pleasantville trivia. And once David impresses the repairman with his extensive knowledge of that classic black and white world, the repairman decides to give David a very special remote. After all, a special TV needs a special remote. David begins to enjoy the fancy-smancy new remote he was given, and that's when Jennifer starts up that epic battle for the remote once more. And this time, the remote does not break. Instead, David and Jennifer are transported into the black and white world of Pleasantville. The repairman informs David that he had been waiting a very long time for someone who knew the show as well as he did. However, David and Jennifer are not quite as thrilled to be living a black and white reality as the repairman assumed they would be. In fact, they get downright pissy about being trapped in a black and white existence. So, the repairman decides to give them some time to think about how grateful they should be to live this highly scripted life. After all, David had often wished the real world was more like the black and white lifestyle of Pleasantville. Before David and Jennifer even have time to process this new existence, TV mom and dad Betty and George come bustling in to remind the kids to eat a hearty attack meal and then head to school. After all, that's what good boys and girls are supposed to do. On the peaceful walk through Pleasantville to school, David begins to realize his immense knowledge would make blending into the world a snap. He also starts to think that altering the show's script in any way would be wrong. So he makes sure to help his sister Jennifer blend in too. All goes well for about half a day. See, this day happens to be the episode when the local school hunk Skip decides to ask Jennifer to the soda shop for a really keen date. David warns Jennifer to stay on script and gives her all the pointers she needs to successfully blend in. But Jennifer is just too much of a free spirit for that. So instead of simply enjoying a keen date at the soda shop, Jennifer decides to take Skip down to Lover's Lane to play more than just tonsil hockey.
I think I better go home now, Mary Sue.
Why?
I think I might be ill. Something's happening to me.
That's supposed to happen.
It is?
Yeah, trust me.
Jennifer's choice to go off script in turn forces David to rush after Jennifer instead of finishing up his shift at the soda shop. David's choice to follow Jennifer and his attempt to keep her on script results in David breaking the script of soda shop owner Bill Johnson. Without David there to help close up the soda shop, Bill broke his routine and closed up shop alone. This small change in Bill's routine causes Bill to begin to question why he even makes cheeseburgers. What is the point? After all, every day it's the same. Grill the bun, flip the meat, melt the cheese. It never changes. But when he closed up shop alone, that was different. And Bill liked that. David is perturbed by Bill's newfound adoration for change and the realization of his passion for the arts. After all, it was one thing to try and keep his slutty sister on script, but killing a newfound passion that he inadvertently awakened within Bill is not as easy. At this point, Jennifer's creative use of her body inspires the kids down at Lover's Lane to try this new form of personal self-expression that you can do with a willing partner who has given affirmative consent. Granted, affirmative consent in the 50s was the man telling a dame, "It's time for me to put it in your toots, toots." Eventually, Betty becomes curious about what all those boys and girls are doing down at Lover's Lane. So Betty asks Jennifer to explain exactly what goes on down there. Jennifer asks Betty, like, are you totally sure you want to know? And you can bet your sweet ass that Betty is like totally sure she wants to know why all those girls keep making those faces. So, naturally, Jennifer gives her mom the talk about how the bees diddle the birds. And this new bit of information saddens Betty. Not because she thinks it's wrong, lewd, or even crude. Not because she knows TV Dad George would think it was all that and a bag of sin. Which is when Jennifer informs her mom that she don't need no man to drive her to Climax Junction. Not when you can run a nice warm bath and take the scenic route instead. So, on a warm summer night, Betty draws herself a nice bath and decides to practice a form of self-massage. And this vigorous expression of self-love creates the world's first miracle, the burning bush. Now, before David understands why the bush or tree is on fire in the front lawn, he decides to dash over to the local fire shop for some assistance. Of course, these firemen react the same way policemen respond to accusations of police brutality. They're so perplexed by the concept alone that their tiny brains seize up until you scream, "Black teenager with a cell phone!" Of course, even if you lead the dog to water and explain exactly what it is and what to do with it, the dog will still look at you like, "Dog, I'm a dog, and I have no clue what you're trying to tell me." Which is why sometimes you just have to lead by example. And it is in that same spirit that David puts out the fire himself and becomes a town hero. Simply for having done what came naturally to him. And now finally this shy boy is getting a shot with a really swell babe. However, David is confused as to why those around him are being colored in, and he is still as black and white as he always was. By this time, all the alterations to the script have begun to bring vibrant colors to a world that once had a color palette as diverse as a film that was made in the golden age of Hollywood. Now, not only is the world being colored in, but the books which were once nothing but blank pages have begun to fill themselves out the more David and Jennifer recalled the gists of the stories they had once read. The more the world changes, the more the people within it do as well. And once Betty becomes colored, a divide is created between her and George. So she decides to leave George and go to stay with Bill at his soda shop, which results in a wave of inspiration crashing over Bill that becomes the town's most provocative act of artistic self-expression yet. By this point, the non-colored people have begun to resent their colored neighbors and what they ultimately represent. Change. Fear of change soon leads to hatred of those who embrace and flourish with the changing times. And soon that hatred leads to acts of unpleasant hostility. The repairman appears to David and chastises him for all the change and harm he has inflicted into this pleasant world. David vehemently disagrees and defends himself, asserting that he did nothing wrong. He never tried to change the world. These things just sort of happened. The repairman disagrees and orders David to retrieve the remote control and come home, so that the repairman can put the world back the way it was. However, David refuses, informing the repairman that he will not allow the world to be put back as it was, and promptly runs away. David made the choice to run away at precisely the right time too, because as soon as he leaves the repairman's presence, he overhears some black and whiteys harassing his sweet-colored mother. Without taking a second thought, David rushes over and gives one of those black and whiteys a knuckle sandwich. And that courageous and impulsive choice to take a stand is all it took to break David's black and white nature forever. Sadly, but not unexpectedly, the colorless people in power of Pleasantville blame all the unpleasant acts on the arts that inspired the colored people. Laws are put in place forbidding certain kinds of music, books, and most of all, certain kinds of colors. Some places of business even put up signs informing the colored residents of Pleasantville that they are not allowed to be at that establishment. Books are burned, and Bill's soda shop windows that were more of a canvas for his artistic creations than mere windows are smashed by the colorless people who choose to feel rapturous destroying an artistic creation instead of marveling at its awe-inspiring beauty. By this point, many of the town's colored residents are hiding out at Bill's soda shop, and after Bill finishes boarding up his shattered window canvas, he confesses to David that he has no idea what he will do if he cannot keep creating his works of art, which inspires David to come up with a solution. If there are no windows to paint an inspiring work of art on, then the local police station wall will just have to do. Of course, this kind donation to the local police force has the same consequences it would in the real world. David and Bill are promptly arrested, which sparks Pleasantville's first court case ever, which makes sense given that we never see the police officers of Pleasantville. So I can only assume that they must stand guard at the town border, ensuring no plain black folks ever enter Pleasantville. Okay, that last bit is just my personal fan theory. As the first trial in the history of Pleasantville gets underway, David asks Pleasantville Mayor Big Bob, who was acting as judge since they never bothered to hire one. I mean, it was the 50s after all. You could just shoot or string up black folks in trees. So what need was there for a judge? It appears I've lost my train of thought. Let me chase that rascal down real quick like. Alright! David was just about to ask Big Bob why David and Bill were not provided a lawyer. Bob responds that they want to keep the proceedings as pleasant as possible, which again sounds about right for the 1950s. Okay, I'll stick to the script. At this point, Bill pleads to reach some kind of compromise with Bob, apologizing for his artistic expressions and offering to let a committee dictate what kind of art he can create. You know what? Fuck sticking to the script. That not only sounds like the 50s, that sounds eerily like today. Artists are now constantly at the mercy of some committee that dictates what kind of art they can create and share with the world. Creating a true work of art that inspires or even provokes an intense emotional response may be possible by committee, but you will only ever be allowed to provoke an approved response. If all art is created only to cultivate an approved feeling, how will we ever feel, know, and understand all the adventurous, gritty, joyful, magical, sad, sexy, silly, trying, and wondrous things that the world has to offer?
You're out of order.
Why am I out of order?
Because I'm not going to let you turn this courtroom into a circus.
Well, I don't think it's a circus, and I don't think they do either.
This behavior must stop at once.
But see, that's just the point. It can't stop at once because it's in you, and you can't stop something that's inside you.
It is not inside me.
Oh, sure it is.
No, it is not.
What do you want to do to me right now? Come on. Everyone is turning colors. Kids are making out in the street. No one is getting their dinner. Hell, you could have a flood any minute. Pretty soon, the women could be going off to work while the men stayed at home and cooked.
That is not going to happen.
But it could happen!
No, it could not!